The FRS and its sisters have gotten a lot of attention as the affordable, enthusiast rear-wheel drive car, the de facto standard. However, the British pioneered this idea and the Japanese refined it. So we brought along a Honda S2000 and a Mazda RX8 to find out if the FRS truly is the best example.
And these are the two that you've asked for. I mean, we've had so many requests for this comparison.
We have.
And I'm excited to do it, but I am a little concerned I may have dug myself a hole.
Well, so what's wrong?
Well, on the PCH piece, I may have said that the FRS was better than the RX8 and the S2000.
I think you did say that.
I think I did too.
I remember that.
So now I am prepared to be wrong. We have them here. I'm prepared to drive them. I'm prepared to be wrong.
I think I'm going to be wrong too.
Well, actually, you know what? No matter how this goes, the fanboys for these cars are so serious.
Well, that's true.
We're going to be wrong.
This is the wrong review. These are the wrong cars.
This is the wrong model year. That's the wrong color.
We're going to be wrong.
You guys are idiots. So whatever we say, we're going to be wrong.
It's going to be wrong.
But I tell you, this is about the only time you're going to see all three of these cars, unbiased by non-owners, together. That's why we're here. You've asked for it. So let's go be wrong. So here is the same white FRS we had on our Pacific Coast Highway shoot. It's one of the first 86 FRS that were in the country, and I just like this car.
It's always nice to get back in a car that you remembered loving and it didn't let you down. The FRS is not disappointing me. Personally, I feel like the BRZ is the better setup. However, and I'm getting back to the FRS thinking I loved it, but we were comparing it against different cars. The two cars we brought along with it, pretty steep competition.
Last time we drove the RX8 for the show, it was an 04. This is a 2011. In fact, it's the last RX8 R3 sold in Southern California. And I maintain that everything about this car is just odd, just kind of off-kilter unique. This second generation RX8 is definitely more refined than the first generation.
After having driven the first generation RX8, I feel like that car was more willing, just slightly more willing than this car. But what I don't feel like they've done is completely take away that fun to drive, that just brilliant enthusiasm. So this car represents the most sorted, best example of the RX8.
Of course, there's two versions of the Honda S2000, and they are much debated, the AP1 and the AP2. This is an AP2. If you want to go with the AP1 version with a higher red line and a little bit more tail-happy suspension, then you can get them cheaper. But in this AP2, they definitely refined the car. And of course, you're buying one of the most reliable cars ever made. The guy that owns this has got almost 80,000 miles on it, has never done anything more than standard maintenance.
What's great is you've got that nearly bulletproof nature of Honda cars, so you don't have to worry about beating on this thing. Now, the car we're driving today is the car we drove in our standalone Honda S2000 review. So driving it later, it's got, of course, more miles, and it still feels fresh. I'm sad to say these cars are no longer in the market. And it's also a tragedy that Honda is building things like the Honda the Honda Cross Tour. Getting right out of the other cars into the FRS is truly revealing. I wasn't thinking that the FRS needed more power. I thought it was fine. I'm wrong about that.
In spite of being the least powerful, the FRS is actually the easiest to launch. But it also runs out of breath the fastest. I mean, above about 5,000 RPMs, if you put your foot to the floor, you expect that extra little surge when you mat the gas, and it just doesn't happen.
here I am stepping on the throttle, and I feel like the FRS is holding something back. And that feeling isn't that it's holding something back, it just doesn't have any more to give.
Now this S2000 has the 40 more horsepower that we wish we had in the FRS, but it has almost the exact same torque. So because of course, the much loved Honda VTEC engine, you gotta rev it pretty high to find the power in this car.
There's enough there, I'm not wanting for power, and as hard as you can rev the engine, it's just a constant surge.
And you feel that VTEC changeover right about 6,000 RPMs. And it gives you that extra little kick in the ass when the FRS is just dying away. The S2000 is a second faster 0 to 60 than the FRS. I mean, that's pretty much the only stat you need to know to remind you that the FRS is just underpowered.
The RX8 also has the missing ingredient the FRS does not, more power.
And this engine, in spite of the fact that it's atypical, in spite of the fact that its reputation is not all that reliable, it's so silky smooth. It feels like somehow this engine is better lubricated and better built than anything you've ever driven. There's no vibration, it just sings up through the RPM, headed toward its 9,000 RPM redline. However, even though the RX8 is more powerful than the FRS, it doesn't actually feel like it. It's not really any faster, and like the FRS, it never gives me as much as I expect.
The RX8 makes great power. You're just gonna not think that it does anywhere below 5,000 RPM. You've got to grab this car by the scruff of the neck, smack it around, and make it your bitch. Otherwise, you're not gonna be smiling. Once you do, you will be happy.
Now, I will acknowledge that for every person you hear about who's gone 150,000 miles on their first rotary engine, there's the guy next to him with an RX8 that's done 3 engines in 150,000 miles. The big trick is these engines burn a lot of gas and they burn a lot of oil. Just during the hard driving of this shoot, we've burned almost a half quart of oil.
Now, what's interesting about all 3 of these cars is they've got electric power steering.
For all of the complaints that are happening right now for poor electric steering racks in cars, each of these 3 cars have electric power steering, and all of them get it right.
So if you've associated electric power steering with something that doesn't feel right when you're driving, or feel good, or have good steering feedback, you're completely wrong. Now, the steering on the RX8 doesn't feel quite as sharp. But what's nice is, the harder you push this car, the better it gets.
If you compare the RX8 steering to most cars, it's probably going to win. It is a very informative steering rack, but it feels larger and more disconnected than the other 2 cars.
If you think the handling on the RX8 is numb, you ought to have your head examined. I would say the steering feels slightly muted, but it doesn't feel numb. This is so strange. I can feel the longer wheelbase, but it plants itself so well.
Now this R3 makes it far more aggressive. It's got a stiffer suspension, and in fact, this car has the longest wheelbase, but the worst ride on the highway. It just kind of vibrates and pops as you go along at normal highway speeds. Even in this company, the FRS is an incredibly easy car to drive very fast. Now, of course, it can't get up to speed as fast, but once you're there, this can hang on to speed in corners almost better than the other 2. With a better set of tires, I think you could outgrip them both. But the great thing is, this just tells you so much about what's going on that it gives you a lot of confidence. It's partially because the limits in the FRS are low enough that you can approach them safely, and you can feel them coming. In some ways, the FRS is like having a really good navigator. They're telling you information all the time, and the faster you drive, the more their information just increases.
I really do love the flickability of this car. It really does seem like it's on an edge. And the chassis dynamics are good because of that low center of gravity, because of where that engine is at. But to turn the FRS from really, really good into great, it needs more power. I was wrong. It's good, but it isn't the Honda S2000.
There's zero body roll in this car. I mean, short of like the Corvette ZR1 we drove, this has got the least body roll I've ever felt. And of course the S2000 brags a 50-50 weight distribution, and it weighs what the FRS weighs.
This car's handling is unbelievably sharp. And what I love is you can just roll onto the throttle and push it harder and harder through the corner, just like you do a motorcycle. The harder you roll onto the throttle, the more it settles the car.
The FRS has a little bit better initial turn-in because the steering rack is tighter, but the S2000 seems to link the corner more consistently than the FRS. It gets a little bit of slide, a little bit of scrub going on, and the S2000 just clings and hangs on.
Getting back in the FRS is like looking up your high school sweetheart on Facebook and finding out that she's almost as good as you remember her. But here's the thing about the FRS. This is version 1.0. Toyota and Subaru designed this car and made it specifically with the thinking in mind that people would be adding to it. However, I want this car to be just that much better. It's so good. Why can't it be right?
I really do love this car. I step away for a while and I think it really probably wasn't that good, and I come back and I realize, you know what? The FRS is overhyped, but the accolades it's gotten are completely deserved. This is a really impressive car. It is a rewarding and fun to drive car. And how rarely is that available at 25 grand new? This has all the refinement and the fine-tuning that the FRS just hasn't gotten yet. I expect that it will, but this RX8 is about as great as this car is going to get, and it feels very refined.
I remember liking the first generation RX8. It was very willing, and I love this car even more.
The thing about the RX8 for me is that I'm very impressed. I respect it. I just can't fall in love with it. It's like meeting a friend of yours' girlfriend, and you recognize that she's hot, but for whatever reason, she just doesn't do anything for you.
I've got to listen to my heart. I've got to listen to the car that made me grin as soon as I got in it again. You're looking for the most pure, the clearest driving experience for enthusiasts. It's the Honda S2000.
Now the downsides to the S2000 kind of put me in a dilemma. It's cramped in here, it's loud, you've got to send the engine revving to the stratosphere to get any power out of it. These are all the same issues I have with the Lotus Elise. And at 25 to 30 grand, I'm just going to buy the Lotus. But at 15 to 20 grand, this car makes all kinds of sense.
What a day.
And what an amazing three cars.
Yeah.
That, I sat in each of these critiquing them and thinking, we're splitting hairs here.
We are. This is whisker differences,
Yeah.
and I'm honest when I say I came into this day with an open mind.
Okay.
Truly. I kind of thought I'd come in picking the FRS, and I didn't.
Okay.
I love the FRS.
It's a great car.
It's fantastic. But the car I jumped into and just started smiling, I knew was the winner for me, and that was the S2000.
I wanted the FRS to live up to the hype and be the best
Yeah.
car here. And I have
Yeah.
to say, I love it. It's a great car. It's still a 4-star. It's still in my top 5. It's all of those things, but the S2000 is better.
I can't believe a car that's 10 years old is still so fantastic. This is Honda at the top of their game.
Yeah, where has that car gone in Honda's lineup? That's the car, you know me, I'm not a big fan of convertibles. That's the car that would make me buy a convertible. I like it that much. It's an incredible car.
Well, these two cars also answered the burning question, does the FRS need more power? I've debated, I'm going back and forth. We've talked about it.
Yes, it should.
Now I've realized it should. And these cars have 40 more horsepower.
Yeah.
So
You're
they
right.
kind
You're
of
right.
answer the question, and they have better weight distribution, so they're a bit more predictable. Not that the FRS is bad, though.
No, that's
We're splitting
such a
hairs.
fun car.
So for
They prove
me,
it.
the RX8 is second.
I really like this car. I should put it another way. I respect this car.
Okay.
I can't fall in love with it. I don't know what it is about it. The other two just spark me. I fall in love with those two cars. I've got to put the RX8 third, but not because it's a bad car. It's a great car. It's just not
It
a car
really
for
is.
me. I actually don't feel like that is as powerful as I want it to be. The same
Interesting.
problem I have with the FRS, but the S2000 just proves out 2,800 pounds with 240 horsepower. That recipe starts to be exact, and this one gets
Yep.
close, but it just falls short. If you drove them by themselves,
You
you'd
really
think
could.
this is a fantastic car. You'd have no awareness that it could be different or better.
And of course, our decisions could be wrong again.
With these cars, they will be wrong. Someone will hate
They
us.
will be.
Someone will love us. Tell us in the comments. We want to hear from you.
Don't get me wrong, it's great. But it isn't first place great. Not compared to these other two cars.
The FRS ties the S2000 for best steering feel. They're both good at different things. It's got my second favorite gearbox. It's not nearly as good as the one in the S2000. When I drive it, I find it the most endearing. It talks to me the most. It warms up to me the best. It's the car that I just want to get into in any condition. And that's pretty remarkable.
If you can find an R3, if you can find one for sale, buy this car. The faster you go, the more fun you have, and it turns into a race car.
I'm genuinely impressed, but I don't lust after this car. I don't want one. And I do the other two.
Frankly, I didn't think this car would win for me, but you realize this represents Honda at the peak of their powers. I don't understand why Honda has gone completely off the rails and gotten away from making brilliant driving machines like the S2000.
I will admit that I'm not really a convertible guy. But on a day like this, on a road like this car starts to make a lot of sense.